Hello, and thank you for joining us for the TAA webinar, Connecting with a College Textbook Publisher in Changing Times, presented by Sean Wakely. Sean is Vice President of Product and Editorial at Flatworld. He began his career as the sales representative for Allen & Bacon and was a top-performing acquisitions editor and editorial manager at Pearson Education and Houghton Mifflin's College Division. He was president of Wadsworth Publishing and manager of National Geographic Learning at Thomson Learning and Cengage, where he successfully guided cross-functional publishing teams to achieve industry-leading growth. Hello, Sean. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kim. Thanks so much for the nice introduction. You always do such a great job on those. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the discussion today about connecting with a college textbook publisher in changing times. So what we'll cover today is changing times. What do I mean by that, and how is that good context for the rest of our discussion today, in which we'll talk about the importance of goals, what some typical author profiles are, and how those profiles will help you find the right contact for following up on your interest in textbook or other writing in higher education. We'll talk a little bit about connection strategies. And then once you've actually connected, once you're, the dog has finally caught the car, what do you actually do with it? What are some important and brief next steps? So first of all, why the idea of changing times? I have been in textbook publishing, as Kim said. I started with Allen & Bacon back in the 1980s. And in those good old days, so to speak, the good old days are not always as good as you remember. But in one respect, they were simpler. And that is that the textbook model was pretty standard. Printed textbooks, certain supplements that went along with them. There was the beginning of software add-ons and video add-ons, but for the most part, the textbook was the thing. And publishers in the college textbook industry were in growth mode and signing targets. That is to say, new products signed up by the acquisitions team were at a premium. And in fact, my first signing goals for the first few years when I was education editor at Allen & Bacon were to sign between 20 and 25 books a year. Sometimes I would sign 30 books a year. So in that environment, there were a lot of opportunities for authors who were interested in writing to write. But since that time, the business models have fractured. There are subscription models, there are digital derivatives, there are loose leaf textbooks, there are rental textbooks, there's the used book competition that many publishers and authors have to contend with. So the business models themselves have kind of come apart a little bit. And that's been accelerated by the disruption of distribution channels, where bookstores no longer have a stranglehold on the local market for textbooks. The web pretty much did away with that. And in fact, there are a number of institutions now who are even discontinuing their bookstores and going completely online with vendors who offer full services in place of college bookstores. The evolution to hybrid methods of online and face-to-face teaching and learning the seeds were planted many, many years ago, but the pandemic very much accelerated that development toward standardizing online course offerings. Honestly, faculty who I think thought that they were never going to have to teach an online course 2 years ago discovered that they could not evade that particular task and had to go online over spring break. And in fact, many of those folks actually kind of really enjoy it now. So it's, I think it's something that the pandemic caused to happen really quick, much quicker than it would have, I should say. And as a result, the kinds of materials that faculty are looking for have evolved along with those different kinds of delivery methods for teaching and learning. So the legacy publishers in particular have been dealing with challenges for a while: price resistance to new editions coming out, and faculty automatically adopting the new edition versus continuing to use an old edition, the digital evolution of different models of combination of print and online, and kind of importantly for this conversation, the content surplus that resulted from all of those decades of very aggressive acquisitions, as well as publishers acquiring and merging with other publishers to have just a large archive of content. That has meant creating new content has not been as important for them as it once was. It's kind of led to an experimental environment that's allowed new entrants to come in, such as my company, Flat World, which started about 12, 13 years ago, and went through a couple of different business models before settling on the current model. And so I'm kind of figuring that most of your opportunity, if you're interested in doing writing in higher education, is going to come from the new entrants, but there still are very viable opportunities at some of the larger legacy publishers. So let's talk about getting started with making a connection with a college publisher. I think it's really important to figure out what your goal is. And we'll talk a little bit further on about what happens when you connect with a person who's in charge of commissioning new content. But suffice it to say that if you don't really know what you're after, that makes it a lot harder for the person that you're connecting to figure out where to go with your conversation. So you really need to decide, are you thinking of textbook writing? Are you thinking of writing from scratch? Or joining a book that's already in process where the authors may be aging and need a new author to come on board to keep the book going? Are you more interested in writing supplements to go with books? And supplement writing can be very interesting these days, going beyond just plain old vanilla instructor's manuals and test items to coming up with creative ways of assessment that involve connecting to digital or other or video or digital assets. And so supplements have kind of come a long way and have evolved along with the textbook toward more digital models. And there are some needs for subject matter experts and content writers to convert existing assets into digital modes. So for example, there are authors who may have been revising their book for 20 or 30 years, and to make that book work really well in an online environment requires a skill set that they haven't developed. And so oftentimes, short of actually bringing a person on as a revising co-author, subject matter experts can be very important to bringing those books into the 21st century by converting some of that content to digital components. New components completely are starting to be contemplated. It's still not on the horizon that I can see, but Kim has actually discussed with me some contacts that she's had with, I think, a Swedish firm that is doing augmented reality or artificial reality. And so I think you can imagine where some of the opportunities are for virtual reality and working with in trades and medical, doing, let's say, experiments or surgeries to practice in that kind of environment. So there's some exciting new opportunities that could be developing in the future. In addition to textbooks and supplements, peer reviewing is a really important component in college textbook publishing. Peer reviews are what stand between just an author writing what seems to make sense to content that works on a national level and that answers the needs of a larger market audience. The peer reviewing process is very important to be a credible publisher, and so publishers need to have a good stable of peer reviews working with them. Maybe you're interested in all of the above. And in fact, there is a progression sometimes between peer reviewing supplements and moving on to textbook writing that we'll talk about in one of our case studies to come up. So why is your goal important? Because frankly, as I've mentioned, limited writing opportunities that are available require you to be focused. They enable you to do the research that you need to do productively to find and connect with the right person. It causes you to be a much better partner from the beginning and not essentially creating a problem for the person you contact to solve, which is basically trying to figure out what to do with your overture of becoming involved with a publisher. It also helps you determine what your qualifications are for the kind of publishing, kind of writing that you would like to do. And as an extension, it helps you to determine, the goal helps you to determine how you might become qualified if you're not quite there yet with the background that you need to be considered for one of these roles that we talked about. So let's talk a little bit about the typical author profile for a textbook. Now, this is kind of the ideal profile, and all of these boxes don't necessarily need to be checked to be a viable candidate for a textbook author, a textbook project. But most of them in some way or shape or form need to be present in order for you to be considered seriously by a person acquiring a project or new content. Are you actively teaching the course? Believe it or not, I am approached more often than I would have guessed by people who say, I'd like to write a book, but I don't actually teach a course, but I think this is a big course which would actually generate a lot of royalties for me. So that's what I'd like to write for. And my response is, I think you really need to go back and teach that course because you have to understand what the learning challenges are that the students have when they're taking that course. What are the common stumbling blocks that they run across? Because what you're trying to do when you're writing a textbook is to solve a problem that the current textbooks are not necessarily addressing fully or to the best ability. So teaching the course, I think, is really important. For me, it's kind of one of those non-negotiables. What is the degree that you have? Most textbook publishers, for most textbooks, do expect an author to have a PhD in the general discipline for the course for which they're writing, if not for that particular course itself. Tenure is desirable for a couple of reasons. One of them is that tenured faculty don't have to worry so much about whether they're writing non-scholarly work. It frees them to do other kind of work. It also means that they tend to be able to get release time and structure their schedules to prioritize writing over other responsibilities or expectations. Are you full-time or permanent or adjunct? For the most part, publishers are more interested in faculty who have stability, who have a college affiliation. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the customers themselves, when they're considering a textbook for adoption, tend to look more favorably on tenured faculty who have a permanent position and a school affiliation. It gives a credibility to the author. Certain disciplines, let's say economics, the faculty expectation is that the author will come from a robust school, one with a credible research program. That's not always required. There are courses and whole disciplines where the school affiliation does not matter so much. And certainly, if you're an adjunct, there is potentially the opportunity for you to become involved as a second or third author on a textbook. One of the most successful models for publishing in the business area is for an in-service practitioner to team up with a full-time tenured permanent faculty member to provide that theory and practice balance. And adjunct professors often can fill that that balancing mode with the academic. So when and if you make a connection with a college publisher, being aware of the different kinds of opportunities, such as being a co-author and providing that practitioner perspective, can be a good way to pursue conversation if you're an adjunct. When I go into a college faculty, college professor's office, I will often scan the wall for teaching awards. I find that not always, but most often, faculty who receive, especially awards that are student generated from that school, are often really good at translating their teaching practice into the print or online medium. A scholarly publishing record, that kind of goes along with tenure, it goes along with credibility. Other publishing, if you've written a trade book for your particular area, that can actually be attractive. It can show that you can write to a general audience. Conference presentations, being known by other faculty, not only through your scholarly publishing record, but through um, uh, being present at conferences and making presentations helps for name recognition. And one of the most challenging things when a book crosses a faculty member's desk is getting that professor to open the book. If the professor recognizes a name from someone they saw at a recent conference, that makes them more likely to open the book and consider it for adoption. Office is held if you belong to an academic organization and are active and hold an office. Again, that helps with recognition and credibility. Non-academic work experiences, we talked about the practitioner element that can help a co-author round out an author team. And to me, some understanding of the textbook genre. Writing textbooks is actually a talent. It's not. It's its own writing thing, and the kinds of learning features and elements that go into textbooks, the way to phrase new concepts, being conscious of how and when to use key terms, all of this feeds into an understanding of how to write textbooks in a way that students and faculty resonate to them. Publishers are really good at helping you understand the mechanics of textbook writing, but some sensitivity to it upfront, as oftentimes is exhibited in the proposal that you write, is a great way to attract somebody, to attract an editor's attention, writing a proposal that shows that you understand the textbook genre. But most importantly, do you have something to say? And what is it? What is the textbook that you are planning to write? What is the supplement that you're planning to compose? What is it you're trying to accomplish? And having a clear idea of that helps you better present yourself and connect with the publisher. So let's talk a little bit about case. In this case, there's a Flat World author who is the lead author with Baron Erdogan of 3 Flat World textbooks. Talia Baron is professor at Portland State University, and she is the recent past president of the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology. That role positions her to be a very authoritative voice for the area and relates specifically to organizational behavior and management, the areas in which she is writing. She's a top researcher and a conference presenter, and she and Baron brought to the table the idea that they wanted to write a new organizational behavior book that bridged theory and practice and actually had textbook features that took advantage of the genre, one of them being the OB toolbox feature that provided students with helpful tips, not only as they're learning the material, but if they're working today, they would be able to apply those concepts immediately to their interactions with coworkers. Because the book is driven by core values and interpersonal implications of actions, not only does it bridge science and practice, it also brings to bear a very important set of themes and topics that are current in the discipline right now. This book, Talia's books are also TAA award-winning books as well. The TAA has recognized the value inherent in the kind of textbook project that she and Baron have worked on. So this is the kind of the typical author profile, checking a lot of the boxes: tenured professor, top researcher, past president of the academic organization for the area for which he writes. We have other examples: John Taylor, Stanford University. He's a top economist who has been a global policy advisor to presidents. John Gallagher at Boston College and Information Systems, who broke the mold when he wrote his book in a very different way from the competitors, and also was very active in startups in the Boston area. So these are this would be the typical kind of author profile for a textbook. But there are other author profiles that can be very attractive to publishers. For example, Flat World just published a new entrepreneurship book by Greg Autry, who is the clinical professor of space leadership, policy, and business at the Thunderbird School of Management at Arizona State University. Now, that's a mouthful, but it is a very innovative and entrepreneurial kind of department to be in, brand new department there. So obviously this relates very well to entrepreneurship and the topic of the book he wrote. But it's interesting that when Greg came to Flat World, he was actually a non-tenured, non-permanent faculty member at the University of Southern California. But his experience as a successful serial entrepreneur since high school, in which he had actually started and sold a number of new companies, really positioned him to have the credibility to write this kind of book. The course itself on entrepreneurship is in flux and is not quite settled on a very standard curriculum. The course is exploding in enrollments. There's a lot of opportunity. And so the fit for Greg with the course was really good. And, you know, as the editor acquiring a new project for that area, it made a lot of sense to me. And you remember I said that it's important to have something to say. Well, you can encapsulate a lot of the practicality of Greg's book with a key theme, which is business plans are overemphasized, which, if you're familiar with entrepreneurship at all, is pretty iconoclastic. And Greg lays out a great case in the book for how business plans are important in the sense that you may need them to get some financing, but they can become straitjackets if you actually are starting a business. So the title, the theme, the features all work together. In fact, there's a feature in there where Greg himself interviewed Elon Musk and excerpted the interview and put it in the book. And there's no one more iconoclastic right now in the business scene probably than Elon Musk. So it's a book that all works together. Greg showed a real understanding of how the genre works and how all of the features in the book need to work together. This is one of my favorite case studies. We'll talk about case study number 3, and then in a minute we'll have case study number 4, and then we'll be done with the case studies. But Jennifer Frediani, who is on faculty at Emory University, has recently joined Flat World's book Nutrition Basics, an active approach. The current version is 2.1, version 3.0 will be published in summer of 2023. So how Jennifer came to Flat World's attention was she contacted her local rep and she said, I'm using your book, but I do have some suggestions on how it can be improved. And she was very positive about it. She said, I really like your book, but I do think that there are a couple of areas of research that could be updated. Here they are. We were really impressed. We asked her to write a follow-up full book review where she went through chapter by chapter and gave us information on how to improve the book. And then it just so happened that the lead author, Maureen Zimmerman, indicated that she was about ready to retire from the book. And we put 2 and 2 together. Jennifer has a great preparation that complements the current author team extremely well. She's very strong in certain areas that she was providing us information for improvement. So we said, Jennifer, how would you like to audition to become part of this book? And so what Jennifer did is she submitted a superb revision proposal on how she would overhaul certain parts of the book and where she would bring it up to date and partner with the remaining author, Beth Snow, to just make version 3.0 the best ever. As a result, we came to agreement. She joined the team in summer of 21. She's working on the revision now, and it'll be out in 2023. So that's one of those stories where Jennifer went from adopter to reviewer to a textbook co-author. There's another author profile for the custom publishing area, and custom publishing has a lot of different models, a lot of different print models, a lot of different digital models, a lot of different business models. But starting with the traditional print-centric, traditionally a custom publishing operation is very interested in authors who control a large adoption. And that is because there's a ready market for the book. So a custom publisher is not necessarily looking for a book that's going to sell on a national basis, although there are a number of custom publishers who will take a local book and they will market them in their catalog nationally, so they kind of do both. But what's important is that the initial adoption is large enough and that the adopter author can commit to a minimum purchase. It's also important for that school to support the purchase in case the bookstore needs to honor the agreement. Pricing for these books is often set based on whether there are third-party permissions, other authors' content that gets integrated into the book, and how much those permissions cost. If that all becomes too expensive, then the project may not be attractive to the custom publisher because they can't price it at a reasonable price. And then, as I said, more custom publishers are either starting from the digital end of the spectrum or they're a mix of print and digital. For digital first, the large adoption is not always as necessary because if it's a fully digital custom publisher, they're more interested in, or they don't need to actually carry inventory, print inventory. So a large adoption is not as necessary. And oftentimes the content is important to that type of publisher because it's used as a cartridge to load into their learning management system, which is really the focus of what their publication strategy is. So they're less likely to require minimum purchases. Prices are likely lower, and they are actually very open to signing content, usually across many different disciplines, because they're not focusing on particular disciplines. They're focusing on a platform that can be used across many disciplines. I would say that online lab publishers, biology or chemistry, are a little bit of a different category than other digital first publishers. They're more like the traditional print centric. They're often a hybrid of print and digital. So moving away from textbooks and core primary texts and talking a little bit about supplements and reviewers. So there are very valuable ways for authors to contribute in higher education beyond writing a textbook. Supplements are a very important component for faculty. Student supplements are crucial for students to being able to understand the material and demonstrate that they've understood what they've learned. The other component I mentioned earlier is reviewing and providing peer reviews to publishers on the quality and presentation of their textbooks. So in both cases, a supplement author or a reviewer should recently or actively be teaching the course, should understand that the honoraria, which are generally not royalties but flat fee payments, are usually quite modest. Both understand how to meet deadlines, and in many cases understand that if the qualifications are there, that supplement reviewing or textbook manuscript supplement writing or reviewing are possible stepping stones to other roles and other projects in publishing, such as textbooks. I would suggest that if you're thinking about doing textbook writing, being concise but providing adequate detail are very important. I lend more credibility to reviewers who provide citations and references for key suggestions for improvement. For supplements, whether they're print or digital, understanding the role of supplements, understanding the preparation of those supplements and following those directions, and being detail oriented to ensure that the error rate of any supplement that you write is low, will all put you in good stead with the college publisher as you consider working on other projects with them. So our final case study is Professor A, someone I work with at Flat World, who's an adjunct at a strong research school in the Northeast. He's also a high school teacher. Our initial contact with him was through a vendor who was writing content for Flat World supplements. This person did such a great job in doing, in recording video solutions for us, writing assessment items, especially worked problems and solutions, that we decided to bring this person on as a dedicated the supplement writer outside of that particular vendor. This person actually would like to publish a textbook, but in this particular case, it's unlikely. And I'll tell you why. The target course has very entrenched competitors, and these competitors are very well known, and they're top researchers in the area and do a lot of conference presentations and other kind of outreach. There hasn't been much change in the course area. It's not in flux. There's not a kind of a new paradigm coming in that would cause faculty to really be looking for something different. The other thing is that this particular area, the expense is high to publish, so the risk is very great. If the bar is low due to the fact that you can actually publish for on the low end of investment, you can take more risk. But for those higher end courses that are very expensive to develop, they're expensive to publish, they require a lot of art rendering, they may require video supplements. Obviously, you want to hedge your bet and you want to cut the risk as much as possible. So taking a gamble in an area like entrepreneurship, harking back to a previous case study, Greg's book, that was a low risk for us because the investment in writing a book like that is very small. But let's say a new physics book, a new calculus book, a new biology book, those are high expense, and therefore the bar for authorship tends to be higher. So now you kind of have an idea of the roles that you could fill in college textbook publishing, the kind of writing that you could do. You could understand a little bit about how your background might match with some of those roles. And we talked a little bit about the importance of having a clear idea and a goal for trying to determine where you want to go in making a contact. So the first thing in connecting with a college publisher is to research publishers. And as we discussed, you want to figure out, is this a traditional kind of model you want to operate in where it's primarily print? Is it primarily digital? Is it custom? Are you looking maybe not even to be with a for-profit publisher and you're looking to work with some of the growing number of publishers who rely on open source or open educational resource material? So where do you start? That's often kind of the hardest thing. And your experiences as academics, I think if you turn your skills to this particular problem, your talents are prodigious. You have so many opportunities to figure out where you can go to connect with the right person. But I would say start with your own bookshelf. Start with your school bookstore or an online bookstore, Amazon, and start searching the course area for which you wish to write. Don't forget that the college curriculum works according to course areas, course numbers, course names. College publishers map to that. So a college publisher doesn't publish a book for psychology, for example. We publish a book for Introduction to Psychology or Biopsychology. Those are the titles you would want to look for in your bookstore or an online catalog. And then check and see who's publishing. That's why Amazon is actually a really great resource, because you can do a lot of searching fast, and then if you scroll down, you'll see when that book was published and who the publisher is. And, for some of the newer publishers, they are interested in getting into areas for which they don't currently publish. But for the most part, the investment that a publisher makes to carve out a marketing channel is extensive. And so you want to build on that marketing channel and leverage that investment you've already made as much as possible. If it's a publisher that has a sales force, as a publisher, you want to make sure that you're publishing books that your reps understand. And so if they have to travel to another completely different department they've never been in before to sell one book, that's a pretty tough sell. Sales reps actually do a lot better when they can sell clusters of books and go into one department and meet with 3 people and talk to them about 10 books, as opposed to trying to find a department they've never been at before and sell them one book that they're not really familiar with. So publishing the overall discipline is advantageous when you're looking for somebody who is you're looking to see if somebody's interested in publishing a new book. I'd say though, if you're looking at a related area, you could still make a stab at it. I'm not, if you're having problems connecting with the most likely candidate to acquire your book, then yeah, start extending your search and seeing if publishers are looking to expand into other areas. Another indication is whether publishers are publishing first editions. So if you go to the general discipline for which you're thinking of writing, and you look in the publisher's catalog, see if they're publishing first editions. If they're not, probably tells you that their acquisitions program is on hold or not very robust. And then another thing, remember, we we talked a minute ago about the nutrition book and how we invited Jennifer Frediani to join the author team. Do you have an aging book? Or are you looking at a publisher with aging books for which they don't have new co-authors yet? That can provide an opportunity for you to make an overture. So once you kind of cast your net widely, narrow down your list, and then match your goals to the likely opportunities. And again, be prepared to work your way up from potentially a reviewer or a supplement author to textbooks if that's what your ultimate goal is. The next step then, once you've done your research, is determine whom to contact at the publishers that you're targeting. Well, in the good old days I alluded to earlier, the acquisitions editor was the typical name for the person who brought new content into the company and found and negotiated with new authors. Sometimes they were called sponsoring editor or list editor, but for the most part, it was acquisitions editor. But that name has kind of been superseded by a new generation of title: product manager, portfolio manager, brand manager. So when you actually are looking in when you're checking sources to find an acquisitions editor, don't necessarily expect to find that name. And we'll show you some examples in a second that can help you track down where you can find these folks. Other resources are digital media editors, development editors, assistant editors, and editorial assistants. While these people may not actually be acquiring content or textbooks, they are acquiring content in many cases for supplements or looking for reviewers in addition to the product manager or acquisitions editor. So what are some of the sources you can use to find the right contact? Well, there's the publisher's website. There are the copyright pages in the publisher's own textbooks that identify who was involved with that textbook. Authors often acknowledge the book team in the preface. The customer service team, believe it or not, at the college publisher can sometimes be a way to connect you. Social media. If you are looking for, let's say, if you think that Flat World is a great opportunity for your book, and you decide that rather than look on our website, you wanted to look at LinkedIn, you can do a search and you can find me really easily. You can also find, through keyword searches, Twitter handles or Twitter feeds for publishers, but also for individuals within those publishers. Listservs and academic organizations are also great places to post a query and ask the hive mind, ask your colleagues at other institutions if they have any contacts with publishers and could they help you with a name. And of course, going to TAA, that is a great resource for the publishers who are members and even non-members. The TAA can help identify what might be a good match and who might be the right contact. Local sales representatives. If you are still called on by a publisher's representative, you can ask that person whether they can give you the name of the editor who's acquiring a new product. Publishers often have a rep finder on their website. So if you don't have a local rep, you could find the rep and then give that rep a call. Bookstores' textbook managers, they often know who the local rep is. Again, it's another way to find that rep and then use that person as your contact to find an editorial acquiring editor. And department assistants or chairs. Sales reps often leave cards with department assistants and chairs in case there are any kind of textbook ordering problems in that department. They want to make sure that there's a central contact there that faculty can go to. So the assistants and chairs are often that person who has the information. And then published authors. So if you know of a published author, if you're friends with a published author, even if you're not, most published authors have been where you are at, and they are very happy to lend a helping hand to a new author by providing a contact. One size does not fit all in this situation. So combine approaches. Make your list of possible publishers and then narrow it down. But try and try again until you feel like you've really beaten the bushes thoroughly. So I mentioned that publishers' websites often have a way to connect with somebody who is acquiring new books or new projects. This is the Flat World website. At the bottom, we have a hot link, Write with Us. It takes you right to an email pop-up that will have you contact me. I looked at just randomly a number of other publishers, Wiley, Sage, Top Hat. All of them have a page that invites you as a potential author to contact the publisher. In some cases, the publisher even tells you who the acquiring editor is in the area, which you might be interested in, as well as an email address to contact them. I mentioned copyright pages a second ago. So if you look at the copyright page of a book, I'm not sure if you've ever really done it in your life for any reason to do so, but if you look at the copyright pages, often there's a masthead that tells you everybody who is involved in writing that book, or the book team involved in publishing that book. In this case, this is a biology book published by Pearson. You see product manager, Rebecca Berari Schwartz. I actually know Rebecca. She's a great editor. So if you're writing biology, she's an excellent contact for you to have. And you can see everyone involved, including the editorial assistant. If you're not getting a response from the product manager, then contact the editorial assistant and see if that person will respond. Editorial assistants are always looking for peer reviewers. It's a great way to make an initial contact with a person at that level. I mentioned the acknowledgments pages. So this is a Flat World book for biopsychology. The author is Martin Shapiro. And he kindly made reference in his acknowledgments page to me. So if I was making a list of contact names of publishers and I was targeting Flat World, I would have a name, Sean Wakely at Flat World, that I would put down on the list as somebody I could contact. Flat World and other publishers have customer support pages. I often get unsolicited ideas sent to me through this group. So if you go to the publisher's page and there's a support link, you can click on it. And in this example, this is just to show you, it comes right from Flat World support right into my mailbox directly to me. I think the very large publishers, this may not be the most productive route, but certainly for small publishers, this is, I think, an excellent way to connect with the right person if you've had no luck the other ways, finding who might be the right contact. I mentioned the sales rep finder. This is from the Macmillan Learning website. In this case, you just follow the links at on the page, on the main page, to find your rep by school, by zip code, whatever. Then you can follow up with that person and say, I'm interested in writing. Is there a contact you have in your editorial group who might be interested in talking to me about my idea to peer review, write a supplement, or write a textbook? So connecting and building rapport. There are many ways to build rapport with other people. Everyone's unique. But here are 10 strategies I would recommend as a place to start. Go ahead and reach out directly. Email through some of the sources I've provided already. LinkedIn or Twitter. Believe it or not, if you can get a phone number, call by phone. I have people call me up. I have to say these days, I do not always pick up if I don't recognize the number. So leave a message and I will call you back. Become a peer reviewer. It's a great way for the publisher to get to know you, just as we got to know Jennifer and her ability through her peer reviews. You can provide the same service to a publisher, but also create a relationship. Writing a supplement or digital asset is a great stepping stone to showing that you have the talent necessary to write a textbook, write a supplement and do it well, and it shows that you actually are competent potentially to write a larger work. Contribute features or chapter sections. It's another thing that you can offer if you have a particular area of expertise. Many textbooks actually have feature programs. So for example, I was working with a psychology author many years ago, Wayne Whiten, and we were talking about the growth in interest in critical thinking. And Wayne said, I know the perfect person who is globally renowned for critical thinking. Let's bring her on board and let's have her write a critical thinking box for every chapter in addition to what I'm going to be doing with the narrative. So that can be a great way to get involved in the work. Participate in market research. And this is kind of combined with number 7. Often market research in the past had been done at academic conferences. Oftentimes now it's done online. But participating in market research is a great way if you get solicited for you to connect with somebody and show your interest as well as to demonstrate your qualifications. Talked about cultivating the local sales rep. Academic conferences where there are exhibit booths, they're starting to come back. For example, this year the Texas Community College Association is having a face-to-face conference where they didn't last year. Other conferences are going hybrid. The National Communication Association in November, they had a face-to-face conference. So as you start going back to academic conferences, going to the exhibit hall and going to the publisher's booth does a few things. It gives you actually a large number of books that you can look through in print when they're displaying print, to look at copyright pages, to ask the people working there if they are an editorial or if they can give you a contact in editorial. It's a great way to make contact if you can do it that way. I was talking to a friend at Pearson, and she said that what she does is she actually, when she's looking to sign a book in an area, she starts looking on the web for blog writings. And that does a lot of things. It shows that somebody can write on a schedule. If the blog comes out, every Friday, like clockwork, that person is disciplined and can write according to a schedule. Obviously, the writing talent can make itself apparent through blog writing, and it does have the advantage, if it's a popular blog, of having other faculty recognize that person's name. Certainly, network. Take a bit of an initiative. Take a little bit of a chance. As I said, write to an established author. Ask, how did you get started? Would you, be willing to give me the name of your editor? Would you be willing to introduce me? Same thing as networking with your local rep. So network, and then be persistent, but also be respectful. And what do I mean by respectful? Well, make sure you're barking up the right tree. So if you are contacting an editor and you want to write a book in, let's say, social science methods, make sure that you're not talking to the business editor, right? You want to make sure that you're being respectful of that person's time. So you got to do your homework, because you need to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You're interrupting that person's day. They have a lot of deadlines, etc. So if you actually are looking for that person to just figure out what to do with your overture, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, because that's creating friction. And the easier you make it for someone to recognize your goals and your qualifications, the better success you're going to have in making progress with building rapport or relationship and potentially getting an agreement struck with that person. Obviously, you want to mention referrals if possible and if pertinent. This is a hard one, and it is a very nuanced one. But if you can find a way to seek a very modest commitment or reason to continue discussion without scaring the person off, you can't be too heavy-handed. For example, if you say, I'm doing research in this particular area, I think it would lend itself very well to a theme for a new textbook. Maybe your authors would be interested. I'm not sure if they've seen this. It's been peer reviewed. It's been published. I will send you the research study, and I would like you to feel free to share it with your authors and your development people. Again, you can do that in a way that's modest and reasonable, but it can build a relationship, and it does give you an opportunity to follow up in a couple of weeks and say, I sent it, just wanted to make sure, did you have any questions about it? You see, you can keep that conversation going in a way that adds value to the recipient and your relationship with that person. The days of writing to dear Mr., Ms., Sir, Madam, they're pretty much over and they feel like form letters. I don't think you should feel reluctant to address an editor by first name. Of course, if it's a name, my name's easy because there's no nickname. I suppose you'd use a full name for other people, but you can be somewhat informal. And I think it actually sets a better tone for textbook writing that way. And some people, I think that what they need to do is demonstrate that the publisher is doing something wrong. And so don't be too critical. It's possible to provide constructive feedback, but there's a line between constructive and being too harsh. And no one really responds well to that on a first contact. Prepare for rejection. It's going to happen. You're going to have to potentially talk to a lot of people before you find somebody who's interested in your particular qualifications and value proposition. But if you're reasonable about what they are and you're making the right contacts that have been researched and properly vetted, then I think you're going to stand in good shape. If you are rejected, ask how you can become a more attractive candidate. Or ask for referrals. This happens a lot with me. If I'm not publishing in a particular area, or if this book is not a good fit for whatever reason, the profile's wrong, time isn't right, we already have 3 books for that area, and this is just too similar to them, I will think about another publisher that might be a good match, and then I will refer them. But I'm more likely to do that if somebody asks me. And there's bonus points if a mutual acquaintance actually provides the introduction. Feel free to provide an unsolicited product review. That essentially is what happened with Jennifer Frediani, and then everything went from there. Especially if it's custom publishing that you're interested in, mention your teaching experience and the size of adoption. And I guess if you actually do control the decision for that adoption, but if you do actually control a large adoption, that is good for any publisher to know, because even if the publisher is a nationally oriented publisher, knowing that there's a basis of, let's say, 1,000 students who are likely to use this book, that's a good starting point for any project. It's not the reason to sign a project for a traditional publisher, but it can help. And there's an appendix for the publisher's websites on slide 17. So Kim, that is my presentation, and we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Sean. So we do have a couple questions in here, but if you have a question for Sean, please type it into the control panel on your screen, and I'll read it to Sean. So the first was just a question about, do you have any reading recommendations for understanding the textbook genre?
Kim, this is like a shameless plug for me. Text for Flat World TAA actually publishes a book that was lead authored by Mary Ellen LaBianca, and I contributed to it, and it's all about how to write and develop your college textbook. That, to me, would be the resource that I would recommend, and you can get it from the TAA site.
All right, thanks, Sean. So the second question is, first he had a comment. Thank you, Sean, very informative. What does a publisher want to see in a proposal?
Oh, great question. So kind of toward the end, we talked about next steps, right? And if you do make that connection, then the publisher is often, most of the time, going to ask you to submit a proposal and a detailed table of contents. And if you look on the publisher's websites, you will see that oftentimes there is a set of guidelines for writing that proposal and detailed table of contents. I have one that I send out when someone contacts me. That's the first thing I do, because it is the document that becomes, it's so important because it's the blueprint for the book that you're eventually going to write. Now, that doesn't mean it is going to change and evolve, but it will tell the publisher Are you aware of the marketplace and how it operates? Do you understand the course itself? What is it that you're trying to say? That has to feature prominently in the proposal that you write. Do you understand what the dynamics are in the course and where it's evolving? And is your book actually keeping pace with that or leading it? The other thing that is generally in a proposal is, what is your book going to look like? What will a chapter, what will the features that a typical chapter will have? An introduction, learning objectives, special, pull-out features such as boxes. Are you going to be doing any digital components along with it? Or maybe you're going to link just to YouTube. That is totally a viable way right now of creating hybrid rich media links, hyperlinks for books that you're creating. So you're telling the publisher all about the book, and then the timeline. You want to put in your curriculum vitae, you want to attach it. And then the detailed table of contents is really important because it shows the scope and sequence of what you're attempting. So your proposal kind of describes the book, its overall theme, what it's going to accomplish, why somebody would want to adopt your book versus what they're currently using. And then the detailed contents is the plan for the book. That is the true blueprint. And so the main headings, so the chapter titles, the main headings, if possible, one level of subheading below the main headings. That indicates whether the book is kind of a mainstream book or whether it's going to be going off into a different market tangent. Helps the publisher better understand whether it fits both with the publishing plan and vis-a-vis other books that the publisher has in print. And then normally that proposal would be shared with reviewer panels to provide further input. Reviewer panels I use the competing titles that are referred to in the proposal. So I'm going to take market share away from these books because people will be more attracted to my book than these three leading competitors for these reasons. I go to those competitors, I make sure I agree they're the right ones. Then if everything looks good, then we talk about a contract. And then that proposal becomes the formation of the foundation of the book that will be written. Occasionally I will need to see a writing sample, a chapter or two. That would come after that initial review. If the book fits, then I might ask for the writing sample.
Okay. We have someone just wanting to see the case number 2 example slide again. If you want to just pop it up. I think that's it, Sean. I'm not seeing any other questions, so you must have really been very comprehensive in your presentation.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of talking for an hour. Start bringing stumbles along the way.
All right, well, thank you, Sean, for sharing your expertise with us.
You're welcome.